the Bigfoot Bullet Point Bible, and the Chronicles of the Three-Toed Southern Wild Man.
Plus the North American Wood Ape Nexus and the Midwest Monster Maloo.
Welcome one, welcome all to Anomaly Detected. We got episode 2, and we're searching for Sasquatch.
Sasquatch, dude. I like where you're at with this. You're excited, I'm excited, and, you know, you've been displaying some Bigfoot detective energy, dude. Some BDE. I'm telling you, you're fully activated by this topic.
So many of the topics I'm going to be covering could be complete episodes on their own, but I want to give our listeners, our people, a kind of overview of the subject and where we stand on it.
Absolutely,
with our big feet.
We will completely circle back around to this with our big feet, for sure. Yep.
Heck yeah. So let's see. I also wanted to talk with a lot of these topics, something that comes up for me when I am talking to different folks about this stuff is this term belief. So I'll start talking about Bigfoot or UFOs or whatever. And people come at me and they're like, you believe in Bigfoot?
You believe in that?
You believe in UFOs? And I just kind of want to ask you, Jack, do you believe in Bigfoot?
I'll give you a straightforward answer. Yes. Yes, right. I do.
All right.
Asterisk. Right. So,
yeah.
I don't try to put a pin on it. I don't try to say I know exactly what's happening. It is a missing link. It is a lost hairy hominid. I'm not going to go that far. I believe in credible reports of witnesses and how many there have been. So many witnesses to something either really on the nose Bigfoot or Bigfoot adjacent. And so I tend to believe people, but also it's like, why make it up? I don't know. I believe it. I believe something is happening.
So many of them have literally nothing to gain and have gained nothing from talking about this subject. And so it really gets kind of hard to be super skeptical about some of their claims. But
you're just making this up to get rich, dude. You're just making money off of this Bigfoot sighting.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm right in that same ballpark. For me, like I said, it's hard to answer outright, but there's always a lot of little caveats depending on the topic.
Yes.
And I think multiple things can be happening simultaneously. Like there can be a big ape out there roaming around the Pacific Northwest, and there can be some person faking some footprints, making it look like it. So do I believe some have been faked? 100%. I can say with certainty some of these sightings have been faked, but not all of them, I don't think. Yeah. And my thoughts, they can change on the day or week about a lot of this stuff, but really what it comes down to is I think there's enough evidence that this should be taken seriously, and scientists and people in general should be willing to look at it as a legitimate topic. That's kind of where I stand on it too. Is there's just too much evidence to just outright dismiss it, and kind of like they say with the UFO stuff, it's like it only takes one. Yeah, for it to be a reality. And I mean, you can't. That's not a sustaining population, but
at the same
all
time,
there has to be is one legitimate sighting, and there was Bigfoot.
At the same time, right? We've had dozens, probably hundreds of sightings over time. Some evidence. It's tricky to qualify certain things as evidence. But for most people, they'll still say to you, do you believe in Bigfoot? Right? But in the person's life who witnessed it, it becomes very real. That's often the case you hear.
And I mean, last time on our kind of loose fit episode, you pulled up the BFRO website, and I want to say there was 700 reports that they have in Washington alone. That's just one organization. So yeah, so you might be asking, what were your sources here today? there, Rick.
What were your
And
sources here today, Rick?
I got the Phenomenal Sasquatch was the biggest one for me today. This is by Matt Pruitt. I think it just came out within the past couple years.
Oh, cool.
It's a very good overview of, kind of a lot of the modern evidence and
a Bigfoot primer.
Yeah, it's called the Phenomenal Sasquatch, and there's just a lot of good information in here. I also pulled a lot of information just from this podcast called Sasquatch Tracks just over the years. And then I've gotten a couple other things. Adventures in Cryptozoology by Mark Freeman. I think it's one of John Keel's first ones. It's called Mysteries of the Orient. He has a story in here.
Very cool.
That I'm going to be touching on briefly as well. And then there was also this researcher, Gareth Patterson, who I'm actually not going to be talking about his. He was the South African researcher, and I'm not going to be talking about his kind of Bigfoot research, but I am going to be bringing up a story of his. So I just wanted to mention that real quick.
Can I just say, I see what's happening here, right? There's an escalation happening where on the first episode, you covered 2 books. I covered 1. I covered 1 book. You covered 2. You outdid me on the first episode. Now I've stepped it up. I've covered 2 books for this episode, and you're covering what, 4? 5? I see how it's going.
No. I mean, so most of these books I've read before and just kind of pulling out stuff that makes sense to for my narrative here today. But the only real source I'm covering is this one.
Okay.
I mean,
we'll get into it.
It's yeah.
But by the way, for later on, I am going to be talking about 2 books by Lyle Blackburn: The Beast of Boggy Creek, The True Story of the Fouke Monster, and Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster. Near and dear to home, the Missouri Monster.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, most people probably, in general, know what we're talking about, but let's cover it anyway. What is Sasquatch? It's usually described as a large 6 to 9 foot hominoid creature covered in hair, roaming around the forests and woods and grasslands and deserts of North America. It can range in color from red to blonde, brown, black, and even sometimes gray or white.
White, yeah.
But most commonly, it's described as dark brown or black. They walk on 2 feet. The arms are described as surprisingly or disproportionately long when compared to a human. And people that get up close to it or have looked at it through, say, the scope of a gun, they say their face looks surprisingly human.
That's right. It's repeated a lot, right, in witness statements.
They also often are reported to have kind of this conical head, which is similar to a gorilla, and it's actually what's called a sagittal crest in their skull. And it is for creatures that need heavy-duty jaw muscles. The tendons kind of actually go up and attach to the top of their head. And so creatures that chew a ton of plant material will have this.
Okay.
I want to say, the most common sightings of these creatures are, usually from like a moving vehicle seen crossing the road, either before or after the car drives by. And, sometimes they're seen off to the side of as they drive by in the woods, and that's just kind of the most common. But there's hunters see them, fishermen.
Got a few of those drive-by sightings coming up later on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So they go by many names around the world. And from my point of view, I don't necessarily think that they are all the same creature. but I think that there's like a good evidence that, at least some of them are existent. So that, in the Himalayas, you got the Yeti.
Yes.
Which is actually kind of shorthand for 3 types of creatures, from my understanding. I didn't get all the different names, or like the different Yeti types, but they have the largest ones, which is kind of about what we think of as the normal Sasquatch size,
like an abominable snowman. Also, yeah, right.
They also have the more like human sized one, and then there's a little shorter guy, which is like 3 to 4 foot tall.
Okay.
So you got your small, medium, and large varieties. And actually, that's so there's a story in this Mysteries of the Orient, the John Keel book, where he is actually in the Himalayas, and he spends several days, if not like weeks, kind of in pursuit of a Yeti. And he has all these adventures, kind of just going through the mountains, trying to getting little glimpses of the creature. Actually, it's something I think
was it like one. It was like tracking like one specific creature. Like
yeah, he's tracking it, but it's kind of like one of those things where he's following like a pathway, or like he's on like a road, and he like keeps getting like glimpses of it through, out in the snowfield, behind a boulder, like all this kind of stuff. It's pretty
stalking
interesting.
a poor Yeti, dude. Come on, Yetis need their privacy too.
I've thought it would be a really interesting, like you could make a short comic book out of it, and I feel like it'd be really cool with like the scenery that he talks about, and like the, kind of little glimpses he gets of it.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And so John Keel, he wrote the Mothman Prophecies too, which
one of the OGs.
Yep.
Where he covered a vast range of topics. Like, yeah.
Yeah. He got real into UFOs later in life, and yeah, I'm sure we'll have to dive into one of his things in the shows here coming up. So that's just a quick little side note on the Yeti. You got the Yowie in Australia.
Oh yeah.
In central China, you have the Yeren.
Yeren. Okay.
Yeren. In the Caucasus Mountains in, I want to say like Russia, Asia over there, they're usually called the Almas, or the Almasti. You got the Otang or Otong in South Africa that I mentioned. And in North America, we call them Sasquatch, Skunk Ape, Bigfoot, Wood Ape, Booger, Bugger,
Momo.
Momo, North American Wood Ape. Yeah. So there's a whole list. What's your favorite Bigfoot nickname there, Jack?
I do love a Momo, I gotta say. But
love a Momo. I mean,
yeah. Skunk Ape though has this ring to it, right? Like that, it brings forth like an image in the mind.
Yeah.
Skunk Ape.
And some of the pictures of the Skunk Ape, I know they have questionable provenance, but they look crazy. It looks, I like the pictures, even if they are fake.
I might misstate this somewhat, but just off the top of the head from memory, those main photos of the Skunk Ape where they're sort of skulking behind, one of them is skulking behind some bushes and you see its glowing eyes sticking out. Well, supposedly those photos were delivered anonymously to a police department. You know this in Florida, right? You've heard this story, right? Yeah. And then to their credit, the police department, the sheriffs actually investigated it as a legitimate case. like, okay, we'll go hunting. Yeah.
So we got names, we got varieties. Nearly all over the world. So it's a worldwide phenomena. But I think that it's interesting how you have these pockets of them in areas, and then there are areas where there's zero sightings.
Right.
Like that to me is evidence in and of itself, because it's like if it is an animal.
So it's not like some universal like human archetype or something. It's not like we're just all. It's not like a dream symbol or something. It's like
yeah. Well, I mean, and that was kind of one of the points in the Phenomenal Sasquatch book is that he lays it out that there's two things that could be happening. Either it's like a psychic, aberration made up in our minds, or it's a real creature. And his point is like why we have yet to find any like specific thing that would cause a hallucination of a Bigfoot or anything like that. And then also like why are people not seeing them in malls and courtyards because
yeah.
if it was just something like that, why wouldn't you be seeing it just
like the drive-through of the Chick-fil-A, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Oh well, I want to ask. You mentioned the desert, and I was just thinking about this. My wife actually asked me about this. Do Bigfoots, or just the singular plural Bigfoot? Anyway, are there people who have witnessed Bigfoot in the desert?
Yes.
Awesome. I didn't realize that. Yeah.
I've heard, I forget the name of the people since you kind of put me on the spot here.
Yeah.
There was a documentary called the Borrego Triangle or the Borrego Anza Triangle. And so there's the desert. I want to say it's Southern California.
Okay, that makes sense. Yep.
And the Borrego Sandman is what they call that one.
Nice.
And it is reported to live in caves and have other, so we can continue that discussion on Discord or wherever else. Yeah, so there is reports of them in desert areas, and a lot of times those ones are less hairy.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
They got to deal with the heat.
Yeah, that's it.
Or is it just that they're in Southern California, so they stay, nicely manicured? They've got like their hairdresser dialed in, like,
got their Manscaped.
That's right.
Equipment and
yeah. Sasquatch scape.
That's it. Right on.
That's a product.
So I'm gonna be. I'm going to be hit us up, sponsors. Yeah. I'm going to be kind of going through and using a bunch of these different nicknames.
Sure.
But yeah, they range across the United States. Sightings in just about every corner. Most reports I want to say are from like the Pacific Northwest, but we got the Swampy South, the Appalachian hollows, and, even the desert. So it's kind of interesting how spread out they are, clearly. So worldwide phenomena, but interesting. Most sightings are from densely forested areas, and I think a lot of these habitats that they see them in, they do have the possibility of supporting a large animal like that.
100%. Yeah.
And then kind of, when you're talking with folks and some of the more skeptical ones, they say stuff like there's no way that an animal this large could remain undetected in the modern world. And to that I say, but wait, I have two examples here.
Okay.
A lot of the most often cited one is the gorilla. Those big, they didn't discover, the Western world kind of didn't discover those large gorillas in the forests of Africa until I forget if it was the 18. I didn't write down the years in my notes here on this one. because it was still like a 100, 150 years ago. It was a while back. So it's still like, although it's kind of more modern, it's not like today modern. So
Right.
I think that's the most commonly used example of what, an undiscovered animal. But I like this one from Gareth Patterson, who I mentioned earlier. I didn't read the book for this discussion, but it's definitely one I would be happy to go back to because his descriptions of he was a wildlife expert and he had a lot to do with raising lions and like helping them get free of what he called the canned lion hunting industry in Africa, where they would basically raise these lions in a large area and people could come hunt them.
Oh, right.
To,
yeah, so
like,
that's why it's
trophy
the
hunters and
canned.
stuff.
Right. Like,
yeah.
sort of farm-raised lions.
Yeah. So he is, born and raised in South Africa. He worked with the wildlife. He knew the wildlife. And so from 2001 to 2009. Oh, and I also wanted to say, when I first started this research, I looked up his website, listened to an interview on him, and he actually just died a couple weeks ago. So
Rest
I'd
in
like
peace
to say rest in peace to Gareth Patterson, because and so he has a book called The Secret Elephants, and then the one I read was Beyond the Secret Elephants, and that one has a lot of the Otang sightings in it. But for this discussion, I'm talking about this study he was doing with 3 or 4 other folks. They were full-time in this search for a group of elephants in the Knysna forest. It's Knysna, Knysna. They knew that this group of elephants existed. They had scat samples from them. They would find footprints of them, and they still could not find or photograph the actual group of elephants. They knew how many they were looking for. They knew it was a family group. They knew that there was a couple younger bulls kind of ranging around the forest, that weren't part of the family group, but were still part of the. And they could not find these elephants. I don't know how long it took them, but this was 2001 to 2009. So very modern.
And these are elephants. I mean, it's not like needle in a haystack. It's an elephant in a haystack.
They had experienced trackers following these things, and they still could not find him. To me, that seems like one of the most remarkable examples of what animals are capable of and what could be out there in some of the more remote regions of the globe. Just out of the reach of modern science.
I do think that aspect of it is like easy for skeptics to throw around and also easy to counter, because it's like, of course there are animals out there. I mean, in a microscopic view, we like discover new animal species all the time. They're often just small variations on stuff we already know about. It's not like we're discovering giant hominids all the time, but like, yeah, there's definitely stuff out there that we are not aware of, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the ocean's a big one, but so to me, I mean, this is like just the best example I could think of for how a creature like this can go undetected. And I mean, 2001, 2009, that's less than 20 years ago. So
yeah.
That's real recent. You have a lot of the equipment we have today.
Real recent, old man. It's just like it was yesterday.
Just like it was yesterday. Yep. And so, in that study, he also came across a lot of stories, and I think he even had sightings of the otang, which is like a Bigfoot type creature in South Africa, known to the natives and not recognized by modern day science. So I thought that book was really fascinating when I read it, and like I said, covering the otang or something would be an awesome.
Oh yeah.
addendum or further Bigfoot type discussions. But I think now that we've established that a large creature can be evasive enough to be missed by modern science, let's take it back a little bit, way back, and talk about the fact that creatures like this have been known to exist based on the fossil records.
Right.
One thing that is recognized by science is the fact that only roughly like 15% of the animals that have ever lived are represented in the fossil record.
Yeah.
I mean, that leaves 85% of animals that have existed on Earth are unknown to science.
Yeah, so, take that, Jurassic Park, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more than we know about.
I mean, to me, that makes the, cryptozoology, the study of unknown animals, all that much more important and needed. Just in that single fact alone, to me, seems like there's stuff there that should be studied.
Absolutely. Agreed.
So, in the fossil record, there is a few really good contenders to fill Bigfoot's shoes. One of them is called Gigantopithecus blackie, and there's also other Gigantopithecus bones and models that they have, but this one they think is the best for fitting the profile of a Sasquatch. And but the bad thing is that they're only known by a few jawbones and teeth. So the DNA of the creature kind of shows that it represents one of the best possible explanations for a Bigfoot. But yeah, the problem is that we only have the jawbone and teeth. And I guess that was found in some kind of porcupine lair. Did you know that porcupines eat bones, Jack?
Yes. In fact, there was a true crime story that I heard about where a body was discovered in a porcupine den because the person that was like a plan. That was the person's intention to dispose of a body. Yeah. Isn't that fun? A little grim fact.
That's wild.
Yeah.
If I'd heard that before, I didn't know about that. So the porcupines eating bones. I'm like, you think porcupines, they're like these little guys, you're like, what the heck are you talking about? But yeah, I guess
so you don't need a pig farm, just get some porcupines.
That guy.
Yeah. Hey, check this out. I found this size comparison. Look at 3 meters tall.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So that.
Wow.
So they, and it's just kind of one of those things where we don't really know about the creature because we've only found a few small bones, but we can just do our best to kind of put it together, the best we can with the science.
Oh, in fact, this is an actual, cast of the lower jaw. Look at that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Very cool.
Okay. Dude,
Wikipedia,
that's massive.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thanks for pulling that up. Like we were talking about earlier, I could have put together more visual examples than I did today. So
you could have done a basic Google.
We'll keep that in mind for future shows, Still, episode 2, give me a break here, folks.
We're sorting it out. We're getting there.
The next example I got is called a Paranthropus, and it's an animal that's also a good analog to the modern day Bigfoot in a lot of ways. They had the sagittal crest.
Yeah.
Which you could find, and they were known for sure to be bipedal. I think they have a couple. They have a better fossil record of this animal, and I think it was more recent in the time scale than Gigantopithecus.
Right.
But they were just a little bit smaller. They were like 4 to 5 foot tall max. But in all the other ways, they kind of fit the general description of what we understand as a Bigfoot. Walking on 2 feet, covered in hair, just kind of a modern ape. And then there's also, in most anthropology and primatology books, there's a discussion of kind of unknown species that are no longer in existence today, but have fallen off, and we don't know about from the fossil records. But modern science understands that, there's room in these models for things like that. So
it's a known unknown, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so with the human lineage, there's a lot of unknown hominoids and, different humans that have existed. When we, Neanderthals is one, that gets sometimes brought up as a possible explanation for a Bigfoot.
What if, just saying, what if Neanderthal ghosts? What if it's just the spectral form of the Neanderthal? Just putting it out there. Food for thought.
Dude, or yeah, like you got a stone tape theory of, stone tape of Gigantopithecus walking across Bluff Creek, and that's what they filmed in the famous footage. But then that's the best footage we have of a ghost.
There you go. Yes, true. Take that, skeptics.
Yo, dunk. Yeah. Gotcha.
Slam dunking.
So, and there's even in the human genome, in the human DNA, there's even an unknown ancestor in all of our genes. Like they don't know where some of the stuff came from. And there's also evidence that, some people have more Neanderthal in them than others.
When you get your,
I probably do with, you look at the way this brow works on me. I probably,
let's measure his skull and find out how much Neanderthal he has. But yeah, it's like when you get like 23andMe, or I did family tree DNA, they'll show you how much Neanderthal DNA you have, like in your genetic makeup, and like yeah.
If you want to give your DNA to the government like that, go ahead. But
I warned my dad and my brother, about, in the terms of genetic genealogy. I was like, it's my my DNA's out there now, so it's time to come clean if there's anything you've been hiding. Like,
and so, it's also one of those things where we don't know about something until we discover it. So like Homo floresiensis is this more hobbit type hominoid that was only discovered in 2003. And if the island of Florence or whatever, that's why it's called the floresiensis. And it was a smaller creature, I think 3 or 4 feet. And I want to say they had real dark skin, but it was, just another human-like creature that could fill some of these shoes. There's also the Denisovan remains that were only discovered in 2010.
That's right.
And they point to a larger creature that has very strong jaw muscles. And, I just think with these examples, there's, proof that there's enough proof that creatures like this have existed. And, I just wonder if one or more of these examples could be a good analog to the modern Sasquatch.
Yeah, like it's not out of the realm of possibility that something like this could be stomping around, at least has at some point.
And, and then kind of going back to that point about, we technically, I give a handful of examples here, but, with everything we've said, there's 85% more of these type of creatures that
that's right
should be discovered at some, and maybe they'll never be discovered because creating a fossil is such a specialized thing that it doesn't always happen. But
it's more or less a freak occurrence. Like the conditions have to be just so.
Yeah. So I think, kind of we take it from the fossil records and we move a little more modern, and we can start talking about some of these Native American stories. And this is one where I, again, am just kind of breezing through these things, and, there's a whole...
I'm fascinated by the Native American, their oral history of Bigfoot creatures.
Mm-hmm.
We chatted about it even, gotta revisit that idea as well. So much show fodder there.
Yeah. There was a really cool, it was a small museum. I want to say it was near Snoqualmie Falls. Out by where the famous falls from Twin Peaks.
Oh yeah, okay.
But they had a whole, it was a smaller exhibit, but it was that was the whole exhibit was on different Native American stories and picture evidence of, or not picture evidence, but their sculptures and masks and the stories of some of these different creatures, and how it relates to their oral narratives. And so the Native American stories, there's quite a few tribes across the nation that and Canada, that recognize Sasquatch type creatures. They have many different names, but they all have the same general qualities. The physical description is the same thing we're talking about. Large stature, covered in hair, leaving large human-like footprints. The art associated with these wood apes often depicts them with pursed lips as well, where they're whistling.
Okay.
And in so many of the stories, they're known to be good mimics, and to help to call people into the woods, or and you even hear this in modern day accounts. You hear about the whoops as one of their sounds. You hear about whistles.
That's right.
Wood knocks is another one.
Samurai chatter, mimicking
the
samurai
chatter. Maybe they just watched old
they watched
Kung
some
Fu
Kurosawa
movie, and they were like, so the samurai chatter. But that's a lot of these things are paralleled in modern day stories. You hear people talking about the rock throwing too.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
There's so many of these things are similar to what was talked about in some of these Native American stories. So the term Sasquatch, which is probably my favorite Bigfoot nickname, it's kind of an anglicized version of the term Sasquatch or Sasquatch. And please forgive me, I'm doing the best I can with what I learned, but many of these languages are beyond my capability.
Words are hard.
So I'm doing my best here, and I apologize if I have mispronounced. Please give me a little break.
We know at least one language. Isn't that good enough? Most of one language.
That's right. American.
Yeah.
So the Sasquatch, it's from the coast, kind of out here, the Salish people on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. They're the wild man. They're regarded as kind of guardians of the woods and powerful spirit beings. And this I kind of go back and forth on too, because I kind of get into it in some of these other ones, but from my understanding, when you talk to the native people that relay these stories, is they don't talk about them like they're a spirit animal. They don't talk about them like they're just a ghost in the woods.
Right.
They were like a separate tribe. They were living out there. They were oftentimes dangerous, best to be avoided. And you can kind of get that with some of these others. So the Nisqually Indians or natives, they refer to a group called the Siatko, and I've seen it spelled a couple different ways, but that's my understanding is it Siatko, and they are referred to as a tribe, like I was saying, that lived in isolation, often in the mountains. They'll come down and steal fish and salmon, and sometimes, like in the stories of Sanqua, they will steal children. And I think that's a lot of times they would kind of whistle or mimic like kind of a baby sound to try and call out folks into the forest. And I've even heard that in more modern accounts too, that this is like the mimicry is amazing with these animals, and that, maybe there's something going on with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I kind of touched on this earlier, but some people think they're always talked about as mythical or spiritual beings, and sometimes they are, but they are just as often referred to and regarded as just another creature, just part of their everyday life that's pretty rare, best to be avoided, but that they're out there.
As real as a porcupine.
And as real as a porcupine eating a Sasquatch bone.
That's right.
And so, like, so many of these things we could do a whole show on. And I just kind of am building my narrative here. So wanted to recognize the kind of Native American stories, but we're going to kind of get a little bit more modern here. Okay. And I think most of your sightings are from like the 70s, right?
Yes. The sightings in Arkansas and Missouri that I'm going to be going over largely center around events in the 70s, the early 70s. But like we'll see, that's not the limit of the sightings in those areas. It goes much earlier than that, but also much more modern than that. We'll get into it.
I can't wait to get it. I can't wait to get into that. Yeah, like I was telling you, I held off on reading one of those books because I didn't want to both be covering the same exact kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I don't know. Have you ever heard of the story of Albert Ostman?
It sounds vaguely familiar. I may have heard it.
Okay,
yeah,
so
Ostman.
I'm just doing the bullet points here, but this one is pretty interesting. It happened in 1924, but he didn't talk about it till I want to say it was like the 60s or something. It was like 3 decades later before he talked about it. So,
which is still early in the like, the pop culture mythos. That's still early, to be talking about something like that.
So basically, he was a prospector out near Tofino, British Columbia, which is an island just off the west coast of Canada. And it's actually a pretty nice little town. They got some nice little restaurants and stuff out there. We went there a couple summers back.
Cool.
And so he's in Tofino. He's in the mountains out there. He's prospecting by day, camping by night. And a couple days he comes back and he notices that his camp has been screwed with while he's out doing his prospecting. Gets curious, but doesn't think too much of it. Then one night he's sleeping, and the story goes he's basically snatched up in his sleeping bag and drug for a while.
Oh, no.
And like brought out to these mountains. And
like
when he's
Friday
able to
the 13th or something.
when he's able to wriggle free, he pops out and there's a Sasquatch family there. You got a mom,
Nice.
a dad, like a younger female, and I think the youngest one was a young boy from what he could tell. He claims to have basically lived with them for 6 days. He had really great descriptions of this wood ape family. He noted their diets mostly consisted of roots, grasses, and sweet-tasting plants. They had a lot of curiosity for him. They even offered him some of their food. The male, I think, was kind of real curious with him, but didn't show much aggression. You know, and maybe what we got going on is maybe he didn't heed the warnings. Maybe he entered a Bigfoot mating area.
Uh-oh. They're like, hey, new kid on the block, dude.
I didn't even write that in the description here, but that's like one of the things he says from my memory is that he thought the Papa Squatch brought him there to be a mate to his daughter.
Okay. Things were different back then. You said it happened in the 20s, you know? Like, so, yeah.
So, yeah. I mean,
dating
Jack,
was different back then.
Dude, if you got snatched up by a skunk ape, do you think you'd hook up with his daughter?
If my wife is watching, no.
No, absolutely.
Yes. No, I don't think I could do it. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, there's
interspecies stuff. It's not my kink.
To each their own. Yeah. So he was out there for 6 days, he says. One day the Papa Squatch got a little bit too curious when he pulled out his snuff tobacco and he acted like he wanted some. So the dude let him have it. Ostman let the Squatch have it. And apparently he took a big snort of it or put some in his mouth or something. And it basically made him sick. And so that was when he was able to escape, make his way back to civilization, pack up, get the heck out of there. And then he didn't talk about it for years. But you can, I didn't double check this. Again, I should have done due diligence, but I want to say you can find videos of him talking about it on YouTube.
Do you think he smashed? Is that why he was embarrassed to talk about it? You think
Maybe.
he did the deed?
I
deep
mean,
shame associated with that.
Yeah, it was a different time. He hadn't quite hit the summer of love yet, and he was, probably never got the funk off his junk.
Ooh, yeah, true. Go see the doctor after that one.
If it was a skunk ape, I don't know. Anyway. So the other kind of more historical one, that's again from the Pacific Northwest region. This one, I mean, it's actually from the same year. And these guys started talking about it basically right away. So it's the Ape Canyon Incident. You familiar with that one?
I don't think so.
Okay. Oh, this one's really cool. The story's really cool.
But you said same year, so this takes place in the 20s? Or was
in
it
1924?
Yeah, okay.
But these guys started talking about it basically right away. So I know there's been a couple researchers that have been going pretty heavy on the Ape Canyon stuff, and the Small Town Monsters. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They put out a documentary on the Ape Canyon Incident, and so I haven't watched it yet. Stuff. But they do good stuff, so I'm sure it's good.
I watched The Beast of Brer Road. I think the Mothman one they did. At least one of them ones they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, they have. They even have like a Dogman one that I think got a limited release on VHS. So
that's a fun topic. Yeah.
Maybe we should look into getting that for your collection.
Absolutely.
So anyway, Ape Canyon. It's a super interesting one. It happened right near Mount St. Helens. They took place in 1924. It's a group of miners, 4 guys. They went out there and they had a little camp and a little claim that they were mining, and they went out there, a couple years. They couldn't mine it all year, but they would go out there in the summers and do what they could. So I think, one summer they cut down a bunch of trees and came back and built a cabin the next year. So they had a cabin to live in. And so they kind of are seeing disturbances back at their base camp. They're, they kind of start seeing glimpses of creatures, and they don't really know what they are. I want to say they were calling them mountain devils because that was kind of the time and the
old place, mountain devils out there.
The old mountain devils. So basically, they were seeing disturbances, seeing these creatures around, and they were feeling harassed. And so one of the guys eventually takes a shot at one of these creatures when he catches a glimpse of it. And so basically nothing really happens. He was pretty sure he hit it, but then later that night, I don't know if they had fallen asleep or if it happened before this, but later that night, basically a group of these mountain devils, the wood apes, they came back. They're tossing rocks on top of the cabin. They're large rocks. They're getting hurled at. It's knocking the chinking out from between the logs in their log cabin.
I know that word. That's the stuff you put in between the logs to insulate it. Yes.
Yeah.
Chinking.
Yes. The chinking. Yes, I know.
It's not what it sounds like. It's
I know. I'm always like, should I even use that word? But it's what you call it. So yeah, grass and mud often used kind of like between the logs to help seal from the elements. And so they were able to, it was simple log cabin, so it didn't have any windows in it or anything. But through that, they're able to see these creatures running around. Apparently, they're jumping on top of the roof, and they're basically harassing these guys, scaring the hell out of them. And it kept them up all night. They may have taken some more shots at them. I can't remember all the details. But basically, they were kept up all night, and eventually the sun comes up, the attackers left, and the miners, again, got the hell out of there.
Yeah.
But they were on their way back. They kind of were like, okay, we're not going to talk to anybody about this. They're all going to think we're crazy. Let's just keep this to ourselves. But I know you don't drink, but the first thing I would want to do after that is go get a cold one. And so that's what they did. They were drinking some beers.
Lean over to the guy at the bar next to you. I got a story for you.
You ever seen a mountain devil? Let me tell you. Yeah. So, that's basically what they did. And they got back and they started telling people their story, even though they all kind of agreed not to. And yeah, I think in more modern times, I think they have found where the cabin was and have figured it out. So it's another one that I think is pretty interesting. But if you want to do a deep dive on that, I would definitely recommend story. Checking out that Small Town Monsters. It's got it all. Yeah. So that's kind of brings us into a little more modern
prospecting age that we're in.
Yeah, I know. Both those tales were from miners, so I did find that funny too, where it's like, okay, maybe it's just something, maybe there's gold in them hills. Maybe the Sasquatch knows that, and
that's a fair theory that like maybe those were claims by these guys to get people to not investigate the areas, like, keep people out. That's been talked about a little bit with some other sightings, like, if in some of the lore behind like the Arkansas and Missouri sightings, supposedly people running, black market distilleries would spread stories about Bigfoot to keep people from like investigating that area. But I don't believe that. The author Lyle Blackburn doesn't believe that, because I mean, wouldn't that attract more people than it would deter, right? You're like, there's this phenomenal monster that has never been seen by science lurking near my property. Don't come looking. Like,
Yeah. Well, and I think that, some of the tales of the Native American stuff is like kind of a cautionary note.
Right.
But yeah, it's questionable whether that would actually keep people away, just like you're saying.
You could think of something else.
And so that kind of brings us to a little, I know you're getting into some stories from the 70s and more modern tales. So I kind of wanted to leave that little gap there. But there's some more modern stories. And so now I kind of want to get into some of the evidence breakdown of some of the better stuff we got these days. So there's really good pictures and videos out there, and it's just hard to rule them out as a hoax. Some of them look good, but you just don't know. And anymore, some of the videos look good. You just don't know. But I'm sure we've all seen the Patterson Gimlin film. It's filmed in Bluff Creek, California. Shows a large hair-covered female figure walking across the creek. That's often pointed out. It's called Patty. She appears to have breasts. This remains one of the best analyzed footage of, any kind of wood ape, Sasquatch. Supporters point to the muscle movement, the length of the arms, and the stride of the animal as the good evidence that it's real. There were footprint casts that, made of the track that she walked that day and in the following days, from my understanding, just quickly to the sighting there. To me, that looks like some of the best footage of Bigfoot. What do you think of that one?
So I didn't know this for the longest time, that I think it was Patterson had actually written a book about Bigfoot, and was the whole motivation to go out there. I believe Gimlin was the camera person, if I'm not mistaken. I might have those two names reversed, but it is a little suspicious to me that you've written a book about Bigfoot and you go to try to find, try to film some evidence of Bigfoot, and then you find a Bigfoot and film it. It's a little suspicious.
There's definitely some suspicious things there, and they were, my understanding, they were going out there to film a documentary on Bigfoot. Right. And then it's like,
and that's all forgotten now. You know what I mean? It's like, it's more of a news clip. It went viral back in the day, OG viral video, and now no one talks about the book or the documentary. It's just that clip. Yeah. Yeah.
So there's also a couple other ones that I had found that I didn't, and maybe some of these we could show on our loose ends kind of episode here. But there's the Freeman footage and Independence Day footage. And so I guess the Freeman footage is this guy, Paul Freeman, who's a researcher. And to me, the thing with that footage is almost like it's like his reaction. He's like a Bigfoot researcher, so maybe he's just not that surprised with it. But he kind of sees the Bigfoot and he's kind of like, oh, look, there he goes. And it's like,
I think I may have seen that one. I think I know which one you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And it's just walking across the trail, up ahead of him. And he's just like, oh, shoot, there's the guy right there, And it's like, I don't know. His reaction kind of throws me off on that one. So
just another day. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's what's called the Independence Day footage, and that one it's interesting. It shows dark hair covered creature looking at the person holding the camera, and then it's like, oh shit, and it walks up a little bit, like ducks down, and it picks up this baby that
like
was
a human
down there
baby
behind this.
or was it a Bigfoot baby?
No, it's a Bigfoot baby.
Okay.
It's all black. And so then it like walks off, but it's almost like it was freaked out by the person holding the camera.
Right.
And
like,
it
come on,
wanted
kid,
to
we're
get
getting
its
out
baby.
Of here. Yeah.
Yeah. So, again, they could all be faked. But
True.
It is pretty interesting, and some of them, do show similar facial kind of features and looks to the things. And going back to, kind of the skeptics say it is just a guy in a suit or whatever, but that, like the Patterson Gimlin film, it's to me, it really does look like you can see like muscles underneath, and the way the arms are, it doesn't look human to me. Like even a large human, like the arms are just like too long on the subject of that film. So I don't know.
A lot of the analysis is like in the gait and like the arm swing, like the whole motion of it walking. It seems to, for some people, to point to it being legitimate. But yeah, I don't know what to think about that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then so just we'll jump off from that here real quick. But I have a hard time believing that these guys with the budget they had could get a suit that good.
It's an elaborate suit if it is a suit. Yep, absolutely. That's not like you didn't go to you didn't go to Party City and get a gorilla suit. Like, right. Yeah. It's like custom tailored. Hair, is like difficult to pull off in costuming, but yeah, hard to say still. Maybe they did. Of course, it seems like they would have, had a camera stabilizer at that point or something.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I just got a couple more things we're going to breeze through here. And this will kind of be our compendium on Bigfoot bullet points here. But, there's like supposed hair and scat samples that have been collected. And then some of these things with this newer environmental, the eDNA, it shows some promising results. It's just pretty interesting. One of the books, Adventures in Cryptozoology, I want to say it was one of the studies of like orang pendek in Sumatra. So not exactly the same animal, but they did some environmental DNA studies of some of the ponds that these creatures have been reported to be around. And they found that they had DNA that it was like 99% human. And so when you get that close to human, skeptics just say, well, it's just damaged human DNA, and that's where you're losing your 99%. Chimpanzees are supposed to be 98% human. If you kind of look at that and you're kind of like looking at a creature like a Bigfoot, how do we know that that's not their DNA?
Like, we won't be able to sequence the Bigfoot genome until we get a Bigfoot in captivity or a dead one, by the way. And so how are we supposed to know just from DNA alone? And it's kind of one of those sticking points where it's like, what's good enough for you, science? What's good enough? But yeah, it's like, we can't just like find a Bigfoot coated in amber and extract the DNA and then resequence it with frog DNA or like whatever they do in Jurassic Park. Yeah.
So there's also this study out on the Olympic Peninsula of Washington. They call it the Olympic Project. Real creative name there. But they're currently working on an eDNA study. They found these nests that they say are woven in ways that like a bear could not do. And so they think that
I've seen some creative bears, though. Not really.
so, and the interesting thing of this is it's in the property owned by a logging company. And they came across this stuff, and then I want to say they contacted these researchers, and they're like, "Hey, you guys can do some work out here. We're not gonna log this area for a while, so it's not public land, you know. Obviously, it doesn't totally negate that somebody got out there to do this stuff, but yeah, they found these different interesting nests, and they have studied, this eDNA process, and it sounds like they have everything is basically claimed to be known animals or human. And again, it just like gets easy to dismiss when it's 99% human. Maybe it was just damaged, and skeptics kind of just dismiss it. So there's some interesting stuff going on, and I want to say that work is still continuing. And as DNA processes get cheaper and cheaper, a lot of this stuff is going to be more accessible to, these weekend warrior kind of Bigfoot researchers. So
have a CRISPR at home and just duplicate that DNA overnight. Yeah.
That's it. Humanzy.
There we go. So wow, I'm convinced.
So I was just going to talk about a couple things here, like footprints.
We got footprints. A couple. Are they big? Are they big?
They're big. They're 12 to 18 inches. It's also kind of crazy. They're often like 8 inches wide.
Right.
They're like at the toe area, where that's like disproportionately large to humans or whatever. But a lot of the footprint evidence is really interesting because some of them have the dermal ridges. They're a flatter foot, so they don't have the arch like our human foot has. It's a flatter foot, and they call it's a mid-tarsal break is what they call it. And so you can kind of see in really good footprints, these kind of fingerprint like dermal ridges. And then you can also see where that mid-tarsal breaks on.
Oh, yeah.
And it flexes.
Yeah.
And so it's not like human's foot at the toe joints. It's farther back, which is more like an ape. And so there's some really good people that have collected a lot of footprints. I think that Paul Freeman, I talked about his footage, he's collected a lot of footprints, and Dr. Jeffrey Meldrum did a lot of studies on the footprints from Idaho State University, who also just recently passed. So another RIP to Jeff Meldrum here. But yeah, I just have a couple of, the famous Bluff Creek, the Patterson Gimlin film, like we were just talking about. They show that mid-tarsal break. It's a flexible midfoot joint found in apes, not humans. Got the dermal ridges, and they have a consistent stride length and depth based off of the footprints. A lot of them also show so if it's in a softer ground, it'll press it down. But then as the animal is like using locomotion to move forward, it'll kind of create a mound in the bottom of the footprint area because it kind of like pushes the ground back up.
Right.
Which is like interesting. And it seems like that would be hard to fake in a lot of these
I was going to say it'd have to be pretty elaborate as a fake. It's not just someone with like a thing on a stick. Yeah.
Well, and like we were saying, for sure, a lot of these things are faked, but some of this evidence has not been talked about, or like the dermal ridges in the mid-tarsal break, you'd have to be like literally an expert on like primatology to figure that stuff out before the scientist had even presented it to the public as like, this could be what's going on with what the evidence we're seeing. And like, that's just interesting, where it's like, if you have that evidence collected from the field before anybody's even talking about it,
right?
Like you'd have to be an expert to fake it like that. I don't know. It just seems unlikely. And then
a lot of effort.
Last ones, yeah. The last ones I want to talk about is called the Bossberg Cripplefoot casts. So it's found near Bossberg, Washington. It showed a deformed right foot with a twisted anatomy and missing toes. The tracks displayed consistent pressure ridges and anatomically plausible, gait and deformity that kind of matched its gait. And so that's another thing you see in a lot of these things, that different people will find evidence of the same creature, at different times. And so like this one had a deformed right foot. Some of them have,
and it was just the right foot in that case. So it was like normal left foot, deformed right foot. Interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of that one.
And I think the gait, the stride, like there was difference when they were favoring the deformed foot, like they couldn't take quite as long of a step because it was buggered up, and so like that's, and then you see a lot
of them
should have
called it like buggerfoot.
The toes that are like splayed out, like human feet even will do that. If you don't wear shoes for a long time, your toes get all weird from our, kind of modern day perspective. But yeah, I think that the footprints is one of the things that gets there's a lot of good evidence, and a lot of people have studied it that shows there's something there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the techniques for that, I know, have advanced over time too, or at least the ones that hobbyists are using. Because I mean, I'm sure archaeologists have had these techniques for a while, but you don't just go out and use plaster of Paris. I forget what the material is, but there's like a certain material to use to like get more of the details out of it. Like, yeah.
So, and weren't you talking about your guys, in your stories, they had kind of a unique foot pattern?
These boys,
pattern or something?
These boys down here in Missouri and Arkansas, they've been known to leave 3-toed footprints, which, by the way, is not a bipedal mammal. There are no bipedal mammals at all, let alone hominids that have 3 toes. But I have a theory on that, and I'm going to get to that more towards the end. And we'll see where that information comes up along the way, too. But yeah, let's get into it, right?
Nice Momo.
Yeah. So again, 2 books, The Beast of Boggy Creek, The True Story of the Fouke Monster, and Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster, by Lyle Blackburn. These aren't your, typical coastal Bigfoot, right? These Bigfoot, they're not going to leave their kids a trust fund or engage in speculative real estate investment, those coastal elitist Bigfoot. The Fouke monster was witnessed. It's sometimes referred to as the Jonesville monster because it was witnessed in Jonesville and Fouke, Arkansas, respectively.
Okay.
And Momo was witnessed around Louisiana, Missouri. We make it confusing out here. That is a town, Louisiana, Missouri. Okay. And we've got Kansas City in Missouri. We've got Louisiana in Missouri. We don't make it easy on people. These are salt of the earth Bigfoot folk. The down home rootin' tootin' skeet shootin' catfish noodling good old Bigfoot boys. And I love that Lyle Blackburn takes time to write about these cases. He was inspired largely by the Legend of Boggy Creek, the movie that came out in 1972. You've seen that, right? The Legend of Boggy Creek.
I've only seen it on your channel. We watched it one time a while
Shared
back.
Shared it a couple years ago, and that was the first time I had watched it. But
I loved it. I thought it was great.
One thing I've found is that there aren't a lot of good Bigfoot feature films. There's plenty of like Bigfoot investigation documentaries or even TV shows, but just in terms of like a fictionalized Bigfoot like narrative, it's not really out there. In this case, it's like split in between. It's actually really based on real events as they were reported. But again, this is The Legend of Boggy Creek, released in 1972, and it was directed by Charles B. Pierce. Like I mentioned, like this is one of Lyle Blackburn's inspirations. He writes in his book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, he writes about seeing it in the drive-thru when it was new. Then again, right, he also talks about his first exposure to Momo. And he first heard about Momo in 1978, so also early in his life, from a book called Monsters in North America, written by Elwood Bauman, right? And I kind of shared a connection with him there, right? Because this was like, right, Monsters of North America is like a compendium of different monster stories. So you just read a short blurb about Momo. But Lyle Blackburn's from Texas, and that was one of the things that struck him about both cases, is that they're sort of closer to home for him. It's not like the faraway land of Washington. It's, Bigfoot sightings just one state over from him in Texas. But so he heard about Momo from Monsters of North America. I heard it about Momo from this originally. Weird, Missouri. I recommend it. So I don't know are you familiar with Weird? So Weird, New Jersey started as a newsletter. Have you heard of this?
I've got the Weird Washington. I got it at
There you go. I was gonna say it started in New Jersey. And what was it? Mark Moran and Mark Skierman, the two Marks, they started the newsletter in New Jersey. They ended up writing Weird US about these high strangeness stuff. And also just like weird landmarks, I don't know, just the weird history of the United States. And they went and did more specific versions like Weird Washington, Weird Missouri, and a bunch of other states. And I love the book.
Cool.
So I've always like remembered that, like, oh, we've got our own Missouri monster here. And so I was stoked that Lyle Blackburn like collected and collated all the Momo sightings into like an actual comprehensive book in Momo, The Strange Case of the Missouri Monster. And so I feel that's a little bit lesser known. Like there is the movie The Legend of Boggy Creek. A lot of people sort of know about the Fouke monster, but I'm going to cover that, and I'm going to go a little more in depth into Momo, near and dear to my heart, but also it's just people don't know all the facts in the case of Momo necessarily.
I think the Small Town Monsters did a documentary on Momo too.
Momo's on the rise, rising in popularity. So but again, Legend of Boggy Creek is halfway between a fictionalized account and sort of a documentary. It talks to a lot of the people involved in these sightings that happened in Fouke, Arkansas. And these are the main events in the case of the Fouke monster. So in 1971, on May 3rd, 1971, there was an article that ran in the Texarkana Gazette. Texarkana is a larger town, or now it's a city, in the region close to Fouke. And they ran an article on May 3rd, 1971, Fouke family terrorized by hairy monster. And in the article, it described that shortly after midnight, about 10 miles south of Texarkana, something came to a small house along Highway 71. Whatever it was, it came back more than once. Bobby Ford, 25, would later say, "I was moving so fast I didn't stop to open the door, I just ran through it." He ended the night in the hospital with scratches and shock. His sister-in-law, Patricia Ford, said, "We have lived here only 5 days and I think we are going to move now. The thing has been to the house 3 times now." Ford described the creature as about 7 feet tall and about 3 feet wide across the chest. At first he thought it was a bear, but it runs upright and moves real fast. It is covered with hair. You hear that a lot. People will be like, it looked kind of like a bear from a distance when they see it from a distance, but walked on 2 feet, walks upright, and moves real fast. So inside the house, they saw something far worse. I saw the curtain moving on the front window and a hand sticking through the window. She said it was covered in heavy hair, had claws, and the creature's eyes looked like coals of fire, real red. She added it didn't make any noise except you could hear it breathing.
That's crazy. So were they describing the eyes as like glowing?
Yeah, that's
or just kind of like reflecting.
When it says coals of fire, I picture glowing, which, right, as we know, there aren't really animals. There's no land-based creatures that actually have glowing eyes. Like a cat's eyes are very reflective. There's nocturnal animals that are very reflective, but glowing eyes is not a thing, really. Mm-hmm. But the men fired multiple shotgun blasts and believed they saw it fall. But as they approached, Bobby Ford was attacked. I felt a hairy arm come over my shoulder, and the next thing I knew, we were on the ground. He said the creature's eyes were about the size of a $50 and real red. He broke free and ran, and after that, the thing vanished. No body, no tracks at that time. Just shaken witnesses, unanswered questions, and something that walked away after being shot. And so this is all covered in this article that ran in the Texarkana Gazette. It's also covered in the movie. That entire interaction, that experience was really like reenacted by some of the people involved and some non-actors. And so that's like the major case that kicked this whole thing off. And like Blackburn in the book, he makes a great point that newspaper articles back then in 71, they didn't do a lot of editorializing. It wasn't like, there wasn't clickbait back then. Mm-hmm. Reading an article like this, you would have been reading it alongside like, say, like the results of an election or like, the crime blotter from the local town. It's like these were black and white facts on a page. Mm-hmm. Someone reading about a monster attack, you could take it at face value somewhat. But later, I think it was the next day, they did find 3-toed footprints on the scene. Like we talked about, bipeds don't have 3 toes.
Yeah.
But quickly, a second sighting happened. Oh, yeah.
And so to the best of their knowledge and from what they could see, it wasn't like anything was missing or like smushed in a certain way that made it appear like there was 3 toes.
No.
You know what I'm saying? It just it seemed like it was like whatever was there had 3 toes.
Yeah. And like I could have done a little more visual research into this, but like I read about how they had a cast of it and they were duplicating the cast for a while. Mm-hmm. But then there was a fire and like the original was lost. And so there are no, I mean, maybe someone has a duplicate out there at this point, but the original cast doesn't exist anymore. And I think there may be photos of it, but it seemed to be like, naturally occurring 3-toed footprints. But
if you or someone you know has a 3-toed footprint, please contact Anomaly Detected Podcast.
Could be worth, or put it on eBay. It could be worth money, right? And we'll circle back around to that for sure after we get through some Momo. But really quickly, a second sighting happened on May 24th, 1971. A large hairy creature was seen crossing a road several miles south of Fouke near Boggy Creek. The infamous Boggy Creek is witnessed by Mr. and Mrs. D.C. Woods Jr. and Mrs. R.H. Sedgas, all citizens of nearby Texarkana. So they didn't know the original witnesses. While traveling on Highway 71, and there were sightings on June 2nd, June 13th, June 16th. It was a regular flap, right? People seeing this all over the area, and got to the point where KAAY Radio in Little Rock, Arkansas offered a $1,090 reward for the monster's capture. And at the same time, a local man by the name of Raymond Scoggins offered up his own $200 bounty. And 3 Fouke residents were appointed to verify authenticity of any captured beast. Those 3 citizens were Mayor James D. Larry, City Marshal Bob Bowen, and Constable Ernest Walraven. The reason I put that in there is because that's like how serious this was that the mayor, the city marshal, and a constable were willing to weigh in on the veracity of anything turned in as like evidence that this creature existed. It wasn't just stories floating around. People were concerned.
Well, that $1,000 or $1,500, whatever it adds up to back then, that was a little more money in the 70s.
In today dollars, right? So this already kicked off major interest. I mean, there's rewards offered. There's newspaper articles they were following up, on all of these additional sightings. And so at one time or another, an estimated 500 hunters stomped through the woods around Fouke looking for the monster. Eventually, officials had to flat out ban the use of firearms unless it was actual hunting season in an attempt to avoid a fatal accident that seemed to grow more likely as bounty hunters continued the hunt. And that's pretty significant for Arkansas, especially in the 70s, right? No shooting guns at all unless it's hunting season. But in addition to all that, according to H.L. Phillips, one of the locals, deputy sheriff by the name of Robinson nearly hit a creature fitting to the description of the Fouke monster as he was patrolling in his car one night. And in the official report filed with the Miller County Sheriff's Office, he claimed that he could see the thing very clearly as it took 2 or 3 big leaps across the road in front of him, jumped over a fence, and disappeared into the woods. In the opinion of Phillips, he was a good officer with solid judgment, not someone prone to wild stories. And I mean, he filed a report. So whether he was making it up or not, what's the motivation to go on record saying you saw something like that, unless you actually saw something like that, right?
Well, I mean, the cops that I've heard about, it's like they don't want extra paperwork. So
right. You gotta be really bored out there if you're just filing false reports on Bigfoot. But so the sightings persisted. The movie came out, Legend of Boggy Creek, and the movie was a sensation. It did really, really well at the box office, and I love movies. It's a very cool story for people who are fans of independent filmmaking and like success stories for low budget movies. And there are a bunch of great details about that, the funding, the production, and the distribution of the film in the book, The Beast of Boggy Creek. So check it out. I'm not going to go all through that history because we're talking about the creature, not the movie, right? Mm-hmm. But it's a fascinating story how they got it done. The guy was Charles B. Pierce. He was like a trendsetter when he made this movie. Very cool. But so of course, things didn't quiet down when the movie was released, right? Larger bounties were posted. on September 16th, 1973, the Texarkana, Arkansas JCs offered a whopping $10,000 reward for the capture of a live monster. And the story ran in newspapers as far away as Victoria in Texas. And I think he mentioned that, actually. I think Blackburn mentioned that because that's where he's from. Or he's from that area. But, right on... So we're still in 73. On November 25th, 1973, Orville Scoggins watched a black-haired 4-foot-tall creature. So 4 feet tall, you mentioned smaller guys. You're talking about Yetis, but a 4-foot-tall creature creep across his bean field one morning. I looked up to see what the noise was about, and there it was, about 100 yards from where I was, walking eastward very slowly. Scoggins told reporters from the Texarkana Gazette. Scoggins had always been known as a die-hard monster skeptic, but after this incident he changed his mind, saying something stalks the woods near Fouke. So you wouldn't just, again, make that up. He's been on record before then. You know, he's like, whatever. Fouke monster, bullshit. And then,
so I just did a quick inflation calculator thing.
There
like
you go.
$1,400 is like $10,000 today.
God damn. Get the gun! Get
that's
the truck!
Pretty good. That's a pretty good reward.
Yeah, dude. So that's 73 we're up to, but the sightings didn't stop there. But it is time to talk about Momo because, right, the time period lines up. I mentioned the first articles ran in 71, right, about the Fouke monster. Meanwhile, in Missouri, in the summer of 1971, 2 women, Joan Mills and Mary, were driving their Volkswagen south on Highway 79, heading towards St. Louis. Around noon, they pulled off at a small scenic turnout in Pike County to eat. Almost immediately, they noticed a smell. Not just bad, revolting. Joan thought it might be skunks, but something felt off. It didn't smell like a skunk or even several skunks. Then Joan saw something move in the brush. I turned around and this thing was standing there in the thicket, she later said. The weeds were pretty high and I just saw the top part of this creature. It was staring down at us. Mary described it as covered in hair as if it was an ape, but with a face that was definitely human, more like a hairy human. It walked upright, its arms hanging low, nearly to its knees, the long arms again. The hands and the palms were hairless, she said. We had plenty of time to see this. Terrified, the women ran for the car, jumped inside, and locked the doors. Joan realized she'd left her purse on the picnic table, and which had the keys. So they're just locked in the car, but don't have the keys. Oh. Now, she hit the horn, and the thing jumped straight in the air and moved back. It was alarmed. But then it figured out the horn wasn't dangerous, and it kept snooping around. They watched it return to the table, sniffed their lunch, pick up a sandwich, and swallowed it in one bite. So, dang. Momo likes a good sandwich, dude. I feel him on that one. So eventually it walked off. They got the keys. They got back in the car. They made it to St. Louis, and they filed a report with the Missouri State Highway Patrol. Again, if this is a prank, why are you going out of your way to file a report with the Highway Patrol?
Yeah.
Right? They saw something. Something happened to them out there. Now, the thing with that sighting is that happened just outside of Louisiana, Missouri, and wasn't originally associated with the major flap of Momo sightings. But since it was a story, it had been filed with the Highway Patrol. There had been a news report about it. Eventually, when journalists got involved, they realized that it was just 1 year before the major sightings started in Louisiana, Missouri, that had happened. So, more credence to the idea that there really is something out here. Like people talk about mass hysteria, maybe in a concentrated area, at a concentrated time, people could be influencing each other in that regard. Like you hear there was a monster sighting, you see something, oh, that must have been the monster. Yeah. But these women had no connection to any of these events, just saw a similar creature right down the road.
So that happened in your Fouke cases too, where they were unaware of the similar reports in the same area.
And, it's like anything like this. How can you just discount all of these people? You have to be a hardcore cynic to just like I get being a skeptic. Maybe these things can be attributed to something else, but to totally discount the sightings, like out of hand, it's like you gotta trust these people to a certain degree,
Yeah.
But so like I said, that was like a year before the major flap of sightings that get associated with the whole Momo phenomenon. And so moving forward, on the afternoon of July 11th, 1972, two young brothers were playing behind their house in Louisiana, Missouri, near the base of a wooded rise known as Marzoff Hill. 8-year-old Terry Harrison and his 5-year-old brother Wally suddenly heard a low, throaty growl. When Terry looked up, he saw something standing about 15 feet away. Their house sat at the end of a dead-end road, and wild animals weren't unusual, but this wasn't an animal, or any animal they knew of. The figure was tall and upright, covered in long black hair that obscured its face. It had no visible neck and a massive pumpkin-sized head. A powerful rotten odor hung in the air. Worse still, red splatters stained its fur, and it appeared to be holding a lifeless dog in one arm. Terrified, they screamed, ran for the house. Right? Inside, you think, these are kids, right? These are kids seeing something. Their 15-year-old sister Doris was in the bathroom when she heard the shouting. She looked out the window and saw the creature standing near the hill. She watched for several horrifying moments before it suddenly turned and ran back into the woods. So that's three people. You'd think, you're the older sister, you're not going to just play along with your dipshit little brothers, right? So Doris later told reporters it was 6 or 7 feet tall, black and hairy. It stood like a man, but it didn't look like one. And so whatever the children saw that day didn't stay hidden, right? Just like the Fouke monster, sightings continued. It inspired a frenzied hunt for the creature. But unlike the Fouke monster, all sorts of high strangeness was associated with Momo. That's one reason I love this case. There is an associated wave of incidents involving bizarre lights in the skies and woods. Disembodied voices and other odd occurrences were also reported. Now, so that happened July 11th? Yes. And so July 14th, same location, right? The Harrison family was hosting a weekly prayer meeting at their home with approximately 30 attendees from the local Pentecostal church. At roughly 9 p.m., after most of the parishioners had left, Edgar Harrison was standing outside with the 12 remaining guests when they saw several balls of light move from east to west just over the trees in the neighboring yard. They saw two others, one white and one green, go down in the vicinity of a nearby school. No one could figure out what kind of lights they were. Right? Lights in the sky, orbs. Mm-hmm. But later, Harrison was relaxing outside playing guitar when he heard a strange sound. Same night. I heard something that sounded like a loud growl, he told reporters. It got louder and louder and kept coming closer. His family heard it too and came running out of the house. As they were leaving, the Harrisons were confronted by an almost surreal sight. Over 40 people were coming toward my house, some of them carrying guns, he said. They had heard the same noise we did. They had also seen the unexplained balls of light. So he stopped the car. They were on their way out, but before he could talk to the crowd, Mrs. Harrison screamed out the car window, "Here it comes!" The crowd quickly turned and fled down the street in a panic. Both Edgar Harrison and a woman named Maxine Miner called the local police to report the strange sights and sounds. Can you imagine that scene playing out?
Oh, yeah.
A lynch mob, 40 people come up the road, people panicking. But, again, you don't just assemble a crowd of 40 people over nothing, right? People saw these lights, they heard these sounds. Something's going on.
Well, and there's a lot of those Pennsylvanian cases that Stan Gordon goes into. He has a ton of Bigfoot, UFO, orb.
I love
cases.
that story. And that happened in 1972. The same year that this is going on in Missouri. Which, that's a whole thing, like, we could go into just that book alone. But the cases of UFO sightings and other high strangeness associated with Bigfoot, there's a lot to dig into there. But I just wanted to point that out. So people were referring to this sometimes as the Marsoff Hill incident because that was the location where a lot of this was centered around in Louisiana, Missouri. There were sightings on the 18th, 19th, and 20th of July. And soon after that, no, it was on the 20th, a reporter from Fate magazine came on the scene, Richard Crow, the infamous Fate magazine. So he started covering the story as it was happening, right? It hadn't died down. According to Crow, on the night of July 26th, witnesses reported seeing a fireball land or hover atop a large tree near the railroad crossing on River Road, not far from where Ellis Minor claimed to have seen the creature. They said 2 red spurts of light shot out from it before it zoomed out of sight. And on Sunday, July 30th, they saw yet another strange light or craft hovering over a thicket atop another bluff. Ernest Shade described it as being orange at first, then later changing to red and gray. Lois Shade said it was disc-shaped and had appeared to be lighted windows.
Oh, wow.
The UFO remained there for several hours, then suddenly gave off a red glow before it went straight up in the air and disappeared. That's journalistic gold right there. I'd be writing that article too.
Several hours.
Yeah. So, but about Momo. Back to Momo. It is very significant that this is like an early case associating, Bigfoot with UFOs. But, so there's more and more in this book too. Skip past some of it. Let's talk about the flesh and blood Bigfoot sightings, right? Because, even it depends on which camp you're in. If you're a Bigfoot person or a UFO person, but you can kind of discount UFO witnesses. You can kind of discount Bigfoot witnesses. But it comes down to the individual often and the report. And I love this for that reason. This report about Momo from 1972 in July. There was a local named Ellis Minor who came forward to recount his own chilling encounter with the beast. Minor, whom a reporter described as a 63-year-old grizzled, toothless fisherman, had been living along the Mississippi since he was 6 years old. So, yeah. Not someone prone to confabulation, right? But so Miner said that around 10:30 p.m. on July 21st, he was sitting in front of his house on River Road when his bird dog began to growl. The dog rarely growled at anything. So Miner flipped on his flashlight and aimed it in the direction the dog was looking. I shone a light right there about 20 feet up the road, he explained. It was standing there, hair black as coal. I couldn't see its eyes or face. It had hair nearly down to its chest. The thing was at least 6 feet tall, with hair that covered its entire body. It stood upright on two legs in the center of the road. As soon as I threw the light on it, it whirled and took off. It's the first time I ever seen an ugly-looking thing like that. I should have been reading that in a voice, right? It's the first time I ever seen an ugly-looking thing like that.
Now would they say "seent"? I seen it.
I seen it. One can only hope. No, it seemed to be headed for the river, which runs parallel to River Road. Imagine that. Clever name. Only a short distance from Miner's home. When the light hit it, the figure turned and ran across the adjacent railroad track and disappeared in the dark woods beyond. So, right, we're talking about these different sightings. One was happening in Fouke, centered around Boggy Creek and other riverways out there. This thing sighted heading towards the Mississippi River, right? Is there something about these waterways that attract these creatures? Why are they traveling down these rivers and creeks, right?
So I didn't go into this stuff for the research today, but I have heard a guy talking about where he takes a lot of the GIS data from whatever the GIS website, and he overlays Bigfoot sightings with, I think he focuses his work in the Washington, Oregon area or whatever, but like more sightings happen within a mile of a salmon run. Like it's like 90% of the sightings or something like that happen within a mile of where the salmon run. So, I mean, the rivers anywhere is going to be a good food source.
There you go.
And if these creatures have big brains or anything similar, like the fatty acids and all that in the fish, it's just good for you.
And, you know, you're going to find food and water. It's also going to cover your tracks and the scent of your trail if you're traveling along the waterway. But so, yeah, a lot happening in both these places, in Missouri, in Arkansas. But, you know, like we've talked about, sightings happened leading up to anything I'm talking about. Sightings happened afterwards. And in fact, right, just before, so we talked about the rest stop Bigfoot with the sandwich, right? And that was about a year before these incidents in Louisiana, Missouri. But there was this incident on June 30th, less than 2 weeks before the Harrison incident that kicked this all off, right? And this was documented by John Schuessler, an aerospace engineer and assistant director of the Midwest UFO Network, now known as the Mutual UFO Network, MUFON. Mm-hmm. And he had become interested in this case. Two men identified as Tim and VM told Schuessler they were fishing that evening along the Cuivre River, south of Louisiana, Missouri, when they looked up to see someone or something wading into the middle of the river, about 250 feet upstream. The someone was big and hairy. At first they thought it was a hippie, which was a person who wore long hair at the time. You imagine, right? They're in Missouri, right? In the 70s. They're like, is that a hippie? Since they could only see its shoulders and head above the water, but as they watched, they began to realize it was not a person. The two frightened fishermen eventually located a ranger from nearby Cuivre River State Park and told them what they'd seen. The ranger was skeptical. However, it wasn't the first weird incident of the evening. Not long before, another couple was fishing upstream from that location when they heard grunts and groans as if someone or something was in pain. The ranger agreed to accompany Tim and VM back to the location to recover their fishing gear, which they'd left in their haste. When they arrived, they found no sign of the mysterious animal, but did find what appeared to be a large, three-toed footprint in the mud, where the thing had emerged from the water. Three-toed footprint, just like the Fouke monster.
Yeah.
Why 3 toes?
Why three toes?
I have one theory. It's just a theory. But first, let's go back in time a little bit, right? And you were doing a great job covering like the span of this entire phenomena, and mentioned a couple great stories from the 20s. But you mentioned the Native Americans as well, their history with Bigfoot-like creatures. But early European settlers had stories too. The first incident was reported by both the this is in the area, in Arkansas, right? The first incident was reported by both the Arkansas Gazette and Memphis Inquirer on May 9th, 1851. In this account, 2 hunters near Greene County were startled when they came upon a very large hair-covered animal as it was trying to catch a calf from a herd of cattle. When the creature noticed the men, it stopped its pursuit of the calf and just stood there eyeing them. Then suddenly it turned and ran. They described it as an animal bearing the unmistakable likeness of humanity. He was of gigantic stature, the body being covered with hair, and the head with long locks that fairly enveloped the neck and shoulders. The men reportedly found human-like tracks that measured 13 inches long. So it's all the hallmarks, dude. That was in 1851. And they're talking about the footprints. They're talking about hair covered, sort of resembling a man. They said the unmistakable likeness of humanity. But it was an animal. But so they, reports back then would refer to hairy wild men. There are tons of wild man reports. And I think that alone could be a topic for us. Just we could go into the Native Americans, the wild men. There's antique reports of these things out there, up to no good in your neighborhood. So that's in the past. Let's fast forward, right, to the future, and I swear I'll get to my theory I've been teasing. It's gonna be worth it. But so in the books by Lyle Blackburn, he writes about reports of the Fouke monster or something in that specific area as recent as May of 2010, and keeping in mind the book was published in 2012, right? And then in the Missouri area, so Louisiana, Missouri is right at the north end of Missouri, which is just south of Illinois. And so on the Illinois side, just right over the border, there was a sighting in 2007, which can only be described as a Bigfoot. And so I'm left with these sightings, right? Fairly modern, 2010, 2007, but I was itching for more, And I love the BFRO website, bfro.net, right? The Bigfoot Field Research Organization. So I'm okay, what is something more modern that we could point to in this area to sort of tie it all together back to modern day reports? And I got one. And a Class A sighting from the website, which means there's pictures of friggin' Bigfoot. We got pictures here. So Will Boving wrote this himself. He self-reported, right, on the BFRO website. I would like to show a photo that I have that one of my game cameras took on Wednesday, August 20th, 2025 at 12:30 p.m. So right in the middle of the day. I was alerted via my iPhone that my camera had taken a picture because motion was detected. As soon as I pulled up the image to see what had triggered it, I was immediately curious because I could see something huge standing in the middle of the creek. I quickly went to show my wife, who I was eating lunch with at the time. She agreed it looked like something huge, but she couldn't make out quite what it could be. You tell me. What does that look like?
Yeah.
Can we enhance? Zoom in and enhance?
Yeah, enhance.
Friggin' Bigfoot. Evidence looks right like there. But truly though, right? This report on the BFRO website, it goes on to show a comparison photo where, that's a trail cam, so it's going to be low resolution, but he took a nicer camera out there and had I think it was his brother, stand in the same spot to do like a size comparison. And it is proportioned like a person, but very tall. And you can kind of make out, right? Really long forearms.
Oh, yeah.
Or long arms in general.
Looks super long, yeah.
Yeah. So, still happening to this day. By the way, this location, they describe it as halfway between where they are. It's halfway between St. Louis and Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee. And I thought that was an odd comparison because when you put this on a map and you look at Poplar Bluff is where this happened, it's really halfway in between St. Louis and friggin' Arkansas. So it's halfway between where the Fouke monster was happening and Momo. Here's the thing, right? Here's what I've been building up to. No surprise, it's probably the same damn creature, right? It's probably the same thing. I mean, you could range that far. It's not unheard of, right? But why would there not be more sightings if these things are, ranging all over the place? And it's because they live in the caves, dude. They're friggin' Morlocks. They could even be degenerate humans who devolved into cave-dwelling hairy hominids. I don't know. Maybe. It's a theory. But this entire region, right, in Missouri and Arkansas, littered with caves. Maze-like caves. There's limestone caverns. And, limestone caverns are formed because of water washing out that, lighter density stone. And so, if something was living down there, underground, traveling from state to state, it might stick to the waterways that it's comfortable with, right? Just saying. Maybe the footprints, right? The three-toed footprints, maybe they were misidentified. Maybe it was hoaxed. But also, if you're stumbling around in the darkness, you might fuck up some toes. You might chop a toe off or two, right? Stumbling around in the limestone caverns. Maybe that's why 3 toes. Maybe they just lost a couple. Who hasn't lost a toe from time to time? But yeah, man.
So, you got to think, too, if there was a population of these creatures living, and, I mean, they even say that Neanderthals were probably made extinct by a Homo erectus, Homo sapiens. If over time these creatures were essentially bred to be through our ideas of evolution, the most cautious of humans, because they didn't run into us, that these populations were the most
That's
scared
right.
of us, living in the most remote regions, then they inherently would be predisposed to be scared of us and live in the more remote locations than we would ever get to.
Stick to the caverns. It's safer there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, with Lyle Blackburn's books, he did a great job of taking these different cases and really fleshing them out. And there are tons more there are tons more sightings in each of these books than I even covered. I had a couple written down here in my notes, but we've been going long, right? It's been a healthy sized episode, a big foot episode.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I'd skip some, but check them out, and I definitely recommend them. And he does a great job of actually showing up at these locations and getting reports from like the newspaper archives, but also talking to people directly. There's a couple characters involved with the Fouke monster that like are really central to the story that I didn't even go over, and there's some great anecdotes in that book too.
Yeah. Well, and they appear in the movie too, don't they?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Well, I mean, yeah, no, I know, and I felt like I went a little longer than I expected to, but we're still kind of ironing out the how this whole thing works out.
Yeah,
But
man.
I really loved how you brought up some of that UFO stuff and some of the more weird stuff.
I
When
had
we
to
started off
tease
the
it.
show, we had a brief discussion on belief. And, I don't really believe in Sasquatch, but I think there's a large body of evidence that should be taken more seriously by mainstream
Yes.
scientists. We could probably do, entire episodes on so many of the topics we discussed today. But I think when it comes
Completely.
down to it, there's so much more to Bigfoot than just the evidence or the stories we've presented today. There's that other side of things that you brought up where it's weirder, it's crazier, Bigfoot vanishing into thin air, walking
Yes.
into a tree like it's a portal,
Using trees as portals, dude.
psychically communicating with people, and
Invisible
interacting.
Bigfoots stalking through underground military bases.
And, and then also there's the ones like you brought up where they're interacting with orbs and UFOs like they're their own Uber driver.
That's right.
And
There's
so
something there,
I
you
think
know?
that and this is a thing, if the longer we do this, you're probably going to hear me talk about this a ton, but I think for these more paranormal things to be happening, I guess before I get into that real quick, like we said too at the beginning, more things can be happening at once than just a creature out in the woods. And so I think it's very possible some of this is hoax, but I also
Oh
think
yeah,
that
some
there
of it for
is
sure.
the paranormal aspect of it. And I think that this paranormal thing has to have a way to manifest itself. And so let me get into a couple things. I think it needs the human to show off to. I think it needs our consciousness to interact with or project itself upon. But I also think it helps for it to have a framework established in the human, in the area, that helps it kind of
Present
manifest.
itself. Yeah, right.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so, I think, for humans to interact with these things, yeah, it needs, like, it partially is manifest, but it's also like controlling that in a certain way to us. And it's kind of like how, a potter can't make a cup without a lump of clay. These paranormal things, they need a canvas to paint on. And I think that's a lot of the reason why, like, EVPs, they work best if you have the white noise behind it or the
Electronic
radio
voice
static.
phenomena. Yes.
Right. Yes. Yes, I did. Yeah. And so like that's where you can like talk to ghosts supposedly and all this kind of stuff.
If you've made it this far in the episode, you probably already know what EVPs are.
That's it. Yeah, I lay out all this Bigfoot stuff like you don't know what Bigfoot is, and then I just drop EVP.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, no. So I think there's something there where it's like the paranormal needs that human element. It needs to like manipulate in a certain way, and it's really hard. It's even hard to talk about. Like I was like chatting my wife's ear off, like trying to kind of come up with different ways to like talk about this stuff, and it's just like. I also think, that could be an example why you don't get good footage of a UFO or whatever, because it's not ambiguous enough. It needs that. And there was also this anecdote of these people in a haunted location were putting on kind of a magic show, and they were like presenting things like it was a haunted object or doing, but they also have experiences where they know what they're doing. They know what they're faking. And they still see things that they're not in control of.
Right. Yes.
And so
that makes me think of a couple things like, crop circles, right? Crop circles have absolutely verifiably been hoaxed, but then there are things that happen even while people are hoaxing a crop circle that can't be explained. Like,
so, as we get into more paranormal topics, like I said, I'm sure I'll bring this up again, but that's kind of just like still kind of forming in my head.
Yeah.
Kind of like working out these ideas, but I think that there's something there that it has to be.
You've got the bulletin board and the yarn, and you're putting pins in the bulletin board and stretching the yarn out into a web. Yeah, no, absolutely. So that also makes me think of a couple different things I like to go back to. Like these things, we assign importance to them and think about them and put our energy into them. And so that in itself, I think, manifests some of this stuff. So, like chicken and the egg, where did Bigfoot come from to begin with? I don't know. I don't know the answer to any of this, but I just think it's fascinating that, the more people put into any of this, the more we talk about UFOs, the more we talk about Bigfoot, the more it continues. And it's not going away anytime soon. It makes me think of things like voodoo, faith healing, anything that has been shown scientifically to manifest partially based on belief. In fact, just, placebo, right? Like placebo is a thing. It's part of every double-blind, medical treatment study. Like, does this work better than placebo? Right?
Yeah.
And so it's like whether it's like manifesting just like you said, the observer, whether it's just manifesting in the observer alone or manifesting externally and is witnessed by an observer. I don't know. Yeah.
Well, and like so much, like it's been proven essentially that our, existence, we can only absorb so much at any given time, and so your brain is filling in the rest of it. And so
right.
And if our brain is just controlled from electrical signals, what if, something hijacked a signal and, I don't know how you would make a Bigfoot manifest in that way, but it's just something to think about.
It could be something entirely different than what it seems, and like you said, we're filling in the gaps. We're just like, yeah, must have been a Bigfoot.
Or, hell yeah.
Yeah. Who knows? Hey, let us know in the comments section what you think. And also, like, if you have Bigfoot encounters or sightings, that'd be the pinnacle right there. Drop your Bigfoot sightings in the comments. Hit us up. We're not like hiding, You can find
not like Bigfoot.
Yeah, exactly. You can find the email address. Also, we mentioned this at the head of the show, but we're going to be talking about these topics and more on my Twitch account. twitch.tv/CivicTV83, and, you know, here on the YouTube channel. You can get a hold of us. We're around.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And like we originally connected over shows like this, you and me, Rick. And so, you know, who knows? Maybe we'll find some other strings to pull on from some of our connections here online.
Heck yeah, Jack. Yeah, I don't know. We got a couple. Yeah, we'll have to continue the conversation, you know, offline here, what we're going to do next. But
hell yes.
Yeah, we got a whole plan in the works here. So we'll just keep chugging along, putting these things out, and hopefully
we'll be back with another one in about a month. Another full episode. We'll have stuff in the meantime, you know, but that's for now, at least. That's our production schedule. 1 a month. Keep it going. Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Thanks for listening and watching and all that stuff. Subscribe to the channel for more. We've got more episodes coming soon. And watch this video while you're at it.